With me in the picture.
I know that.
He plays King Herod.
I know all about that, but
Yes.
what I want to talk to you about is something else.
Rita Hayworth entered the world as Margarita Carmen Canino on October 17, 1918, in Brooklyn, New York. From the very beginning, her life wasn't her own. Performance wasn't something she discovered later. It surrounded her like air. Her father, Eduardo Canino, was a Spanish-born dancer obsessed with discipline and control. Her mother, Volga Hayworth, had once been a successful showgirl who understood both the beauty and cruelty of the stage. While other children learned how to play, Rita learned how to perform. By the age of 4, she was already practicing demanding dance routines meant for adults, watched closely by her father's sharp, unblinking gaze. Mistakes were corrected immediately. Exhaustion didn't matter. Praise was rare. From the start, love was conditional. Approval came only when she performed perfectly. This wasn't just training, it was conditioning. Rita quickly learned that her value came from how well she could please an audience. And this lesson would shape every relationship, every choice, and every heartbreak that followed. But the pressure didn't stop at rehearsals. It only grew stronger as the family turned performance into survival. As Rita grew older, her family became a full vaudeville act known as the Dancing Cansinos. On stage, it looked charming and polished. Behind the curtain, it was rigid and unforgiving. Rehearsals stretched endlessly. Every movement was scrutinized. Every flaw was corrected harshly. Eduardo's influence went far beyond teaching dance. He controlled how Rita dressed, how she stood, how she spoke, and how she behaved, even when no one was watching. Childhood friendships slowly vanished. School became an inconvenience. The act came first, always. Rita wasn't encouraged to dream. She was trained to obey. By the time she reached her early teens, her world had narrowed to stages, mirrors, and her father's approval. Her mother tried to soften the edges, stepping in when she could, but her voice rarely won against Eduardo's authority. Rita learned to stay quiet, to endure, to perform. And when the family chased bigger success, the control tightened even further, because Hollywood was calling, and it would demand even more from her. In 1927, the Canino family moved to Hollywood, hoping their talent would finally open doors. But the timing couldn't have been worse. The Great Depression crushed opportunity almost overnight. Eduardo's dance school failed, and the family was forced back onto the road. This time, there was no balance left. When Rita turned 12, her father pulled her out of school completely. Education ended. Childhood officially stopped. She became a full-time performer, traveling constantly, dancing night after night on worn stages under harsh lights. Her body grew tired. Her feet ached, but stopping was never an option. The income she brought in mattered too much. She wasn't just a daughter anymore, she was a provider. Classrooms were replaced by rehearsals. Friendships were replaced by routines. Normal teenage experiences never existed for her. And just when it seemed life couldn't become more demanding, the law stepped in, forcing the family into a darker world entirely. California laws soon banned minors from performing in venues that served alcohol. Instead of protecting Rita, the rule pushed her into something far worse. The family crossed the border into Mexico, where regulations were looser and questions were rarely asked. Barely a teenager, Rita began performing in nightclubs and casino ships under dim lights filled with smoke, alcohol, and dangerous attention. Her hair was dyed darker. Her clothes made her look older. And when questions about her age surfaced, her father sometimes introduced her not as his daughter, but as his wife. The rooms were packed with gamblers, criminals, bored celebrities, and men who knew exactly what they were watching. Night after night, Rita danced for strangers while her childhood quietly disappeared. The stage no longer felt glamorous. It felt threatening. And behind closed doors, something even more damaging was unfolding. Something she wouldn't speak about for years. Long after Rita Hayworth's death, the truth finally surfaced. Biographers and those closest to her revealed that Rita had confided in them about abuse by her father during those touring years. It wasn't a rumor, it wasn't gossip. It was a wound she carried in silence. Her mother knew and tried to protect her, sometimes sleeping beside Rita to keep her safe. But Eduardo's control ruled the household. There was no escape, no voice, no help. This trauma didn't stay in the past. It shaped how Rita saw herself and how she trusted others. It explained why she was drawn to men who promised protection but delivered control instead. The cycle never truly ended, it only changed faces. When Rita finally left her father's act, she believed she was free. She didn't realize Hollywood was waiting to continue the pattern. Leaving her father's act should have meant freedom. Instead, it marked the beginning of a new kind of control. Hollywood didn't see a traumatized young woman. It saw potential profit. Rita was barely out of her teens when she met Edward C. Judson, a smooth-talking promoter who promised to guide her career. Judson quickly positioned himself as her protector, her manager, and eventually her husband. The dynamic felt familiar. He handled contracts, money, and negotiations, slowly tightening his grip over every part of her life. Decisions were made without her input. Earnings flowed through him first. To the public, this looked like a smart partnership. Behind closed doors, it was another version of the same pattern Rita had known since childhood. Obedience rewarded, resistance punished. Judson encouraged her to trust him completely. In reality, he was quietly benefiting far more than she was. The girl who had spent her life being controlled had stepped straight into another cage, and Hollywood applauded, unaware or unconcerned about what it was taking from her next. Studio executives soon decided that Rita Hayworth wasn't quite right for stardom. Not yet. The solution wasn't talent development, it was transformation. Over nearly 2 years, Rita endured an agonizing electrolysis process designed to raise her hairline and reshape her face to fit Hollywood's ideal. Each session involved a thin metal probe sliding into individual hair follicles, followed by an electric current that burned the root. It was slow, painful, endless. Hours at a time, week after week. The process was overseen by top beauty specialists, but no amount of glamour could hide the reality. Rita smiled through it all, knowing that refusing wasn't an option. Her body had become a project. When the process finally ended, her appearance had changed, and so had her identity. Her name was altered, her image softened, and suddenly, doors opened that had once been locked. The pain stayed hidden behind the smile. The cost was never mentioned. At just 18 years old, Rita married Edward Judson. The marriage immediately blurred the line between love and business. Judson became her official manager and used his position to control her finances completely. He signed her into long studio contracts and handled her money in ways that favored him. As Rita's fame grew, her access to her own earnings shrank. She worked constantly, yet felt strangely broke. By 1942, she had had enough. In court filings, Rita stated that Judson forced her to transfer property and threatened her if she didn't pay him large sums of money, including a demand for $12,000. When the marriage ended, she was left nearly penniless despite earning thousands each week. The public saw a rising Hollywood star. Rita saw proof that love, for her, always came with conditions. And worse still, the studio system was watching closely, ready to take advantage. Rita's growing fame brought her face-to-face with Harry Cohn, the powerful head of Columbia Pictures. Known for his explosive temper and obsession with control, Cohn quickly became one of the most dangerous figures in her life. When Rita rejected his advances early in her career, Cohn didn't forget it. He retaliated quietly and consistently. Fines appeared for minor issues. Suspensions followed without warning. Public humiliation became routine. He kept her under contract because she made money, but made sure she knew she wasn't free. If she pushed back, her roles disappeared. If she complied, the pressure eased. Cohn believed obedience was owed. Rita believed silence was survival. And this unspoken war would shape her career for nearly 2 decades. In August 1941, a single photograph transformed Rita Hayworth into a global obsession. Life magazine published an image of her kneeling on a satin bed in a black lace nightgown. It wasn't supposed to be historic, it was almost an accident. The lighting created a mysterious glow. The pose felt intimate, and the world couldn't look away. More than 5 million copies sold. Soldiers carried it overseas, some painted it onto bomber planes. She became a symbol of desire during wartime. Hollywood leaned into it instantly. The studio pushed her image harder than ever, turning Rita into a fantasy larger than life. But the woman in the photo felt nothing like the myth being sold. And as the world fell in love with her image, Rita Hayworth began to disappear behind it. By the early 1940s, Rita Hayworth was no longer just another contract actress. She was becoming Columbia Pictures' biggest asset, and that made her even more vulnerable. Harry Cohn wanted total control, not just over her career, but over her compliance. When Rita pushed back, the consequences came quietly but relentlessly. She was fined for being late by minutes, suspended without pay for minor disagreements, publicly humiliated in front of crews. Every punishment carried the same message. Resistance had a price. Cohn believed she belonged to the studio and, by extension, to him. Yet Rita refused to fully submit. She endured the fines, accepted the suspensions, and returned to work anyway. Survival had taught her when to bend without breaking. If this story is already changing how you see classic Hollywood, make sure to like the video and subscribe, because what comes next reveals just how far studios went to control their stars. And here's a question for you. Do you think fame protects people or makes them easier to exploit? Because Rita's image was about to eclipse her completely. As her fame exploded, the version of Rita the public adored grew further from the woman she actually was. On screen, she was confident, seductive, and untouchable. Off-screen, she was quiet, shy, and deeply insecure. Friends remembered her as gentle and withdrawn, uncomfortable in crowds, and uninterested in Hollywood parties. She preferred small rooms, soft conversations, and calm evenings. But the studio had no interest in that woman. They sold fantasy, not truth. Rita felt trapped inside the image built around her. She once said that men fell in love with Gilda, but woke up with her. It was the most honest summary of her life. The more the studio pushed the fantasy, the smaller Rita felt inside it. And that emotional split between who she was and who she was expected to be became harder to carry with each passing year. Then came the role that would define her forever. In 1946, Rita was cast in Gilda, a role unlike anything she had played before. Until then, she had been known mainly for musical comedies and light performances. Gilda demanded something darker, heavier, and more dangerous. The production itself was unstable. Scripts changed constantly. Pages arrived the night before filming. Director Charles Vidor encouraged emotional intensity and unpredictability, keeping the cast off balance. For Rita, this chaos was terrifying and electrifying at the same time. She stepped into a character filled with anger, desire, and defiance. Emotions she understood far too well. Almost overnight, the film transformed her into a global symbol of allure and mystery. The studio celebrated, audiences obsessed. Rita felt herself disappearing behind the role. Rita's on-screen tension with Glenn Ford wasn't accidental. Off-screen, the two developed a deep connection that lasted for decades. They lived near each other, confided in one another, and drifted in and out of romance over the years. That closeness fueled the film's intensity. Every look, every pause, every moment of silence felt charged. Audiences sensed it immediately. But the same closeness made the production emotionally risky. The film blurred boundaries between acting and reality. When emotions ran high, scenes felt less like performances and more like confrontations. What made Gilda unforgettable was also what made it dangerous. No one quite knew where the acting ended and real feeling began. And one scene would push that boundary further than anyone expected. The infamous slap scene in Gilda was written to shock audiences, but no one planned for how real it would become. Director Charles Vidor wanted raw emotion and refused to break the scene into multiple takes. He wanted everything captured in one continuous moment. Rita was instructed to strike Glenn Ford 4 times. No cuts, no pause. The tension built with each rehearsal. She was nervous. Ford sensed it and leaned in, quietly telling her to go all the way. She trusted him. When the cameras rolled, Rita stepped fully into the emotion. The slaps echoed across the set, each one harder than the last. The room fell silent. No one moved. By the time Vidor called cut, something irreversible had already happened. And everyone in the room felt it. When the scene ended, it became clear something had gone wrong. Glenn Ford's face was swelling, and there was blood. Rita hadn't just acted the rage, she had released years of suppressed anger in a single unbroken moment. Crew members avoided eye contact. No one wanted to admit what they'd just witnessed. Charles Vidor got the realism he wanted, but at a cost no one discussed openly. Rita was shaken. She apologized repeatedly, near tears, convinced she had ruined everything. Ford, to his credit, reassured her. He told her the scene worked because it was honest, because she was honest. The footage stayed in the final cut. Audiences would later describe it as one of the most shocking moments in classic cinema. Behind the scenes, it marked a turning point. Rita began to associate her greatest success with emotional pain. The applause that followed no longer felt like validation. It felt like a reminder of what she had sacrificed to earn it. After Gilda, Rita Hayworth became one of the most famous women on earth. Her image was everywhere. Posters, magazines, military barracks. She was named the ultimate symbol of desire. But fame didn't bring protection, it brought more pressure. The studio doubled down on her image, demanding even bolder performances and tighter control over her private life. She was no longer allowed to appear without approval. Her weight, hair, posture, and even tone of voice were monitored. Contracts dictated how she smiled for photographers and how long she stayed at public events. Rita felt trapped inside a golden cage. The world believed she had everything. In reality, she had less freedom than ever. And the more the fantasy grew, the harder it became for her to remember who she had been before the spotlight decided her identity. Searching for safety, Rita turned to love, hoping intimacy might offer what fame never could. Her marriages became attempts at escape, not romance. Each relationship followed the same pattern: intense beginnings, emotional dependence, and eventual disillusionment. The men she married were often drawn to her image, not her reality. When the fantasy faded, frustration followed. Rita absorbed the blame. She believed she was difficult, broken, unlovable. Years of control had trained her to internalize failure rather than question the system around her. Friends noticed her withdrawing. She drank more. She trusted less. The woman who once lit up movie screens began to disappear behind closed doors. What no one understood yet was that Rita wasn't falling apart. She was exhausted from surviving. As Hollywood evolved, the industry that created Rita Hayworth slowly moved on. New faces emerged. New styles replaced the old glamour. Studios offered fewer leading roles and more dismissive contracts. Rita sensed the shift immediately. Aging in Hollywood came with an unspoken punishment: invisibility. The same system that once demanded her perfection now treated her as expendable. She tried to adapt, but the damage was already done. Years of stress, alcohol, and emotional suppression took their toll. Her performances became inconsistent, not because she lacked talent, but because she lacked support. Whispers followed her on sets. Difficult. Unreliable. labels that ignored decades of pressure and control. The industry never asked what it had taken from her, only why she wasn't giving more. In her later years, Rita Hayworth faded from the public eye, remembered more as an icon than as a human being. When her health declined, few connected it to the trauma she had carried for most of her life. Only much later did conversations begin to change. People started asking uncomfortable questions about how studios treated their stars, especially women. Rita's story became a warning rather than a fantasy. She wasn't a tragic figure because of fame. She was tragic because fame consumed her without care. Today, her legacy feels different. Not just beauty, not just glamour, but resilience, survival, and a quiet strength that endured long after the cameras stopped rolling. The image made her famous. The truth makes her unforgettable. In the late 1970s, people close to Rita Hayworth noticed something wasn't right. She forgot lines she had known for decades. She repeated stories. She struggled to recognize familiar faces. Hollywood rumors blamed alcohol, an easy explanation that avoided responsibility. The truth was far more devastating. Rita was suffering from Alzheimer's disease, though at the time it was barely understood and rarely diagnosed correctly. Doctors misread her symptoms, and the public misunderstood her behavior. To the outside world, she appeared unstable. To those who loved her, she was slipping away piece by piece. For the first time in her life, Rita was no longer performing. There was no role to hide behind, no studio protecting the illusion. Just a woman facing the slow erasure of memory, after a lifetime spent being remembered for the wrong reasons. As her condition worsened, Rita withdrew completely from public life. The same media that once chased her now watched from a distance, quietly waiting for updates rather than offering support. She was no longer photographed in glamour poses, but in candid moments that felt intrusive rather than celebratory. The world struggled to reconcile the image of a vibrant icon with the reality of illness. Family members stepped in, providing care and protection that Hollywood never did. They shielded her from exploitation, limiting appearances and correcting false narratives when they could. In isolation, Rita finally experienced something she had rarely known: privacy. But it came at a terrible cost: the gradual loss of the memories that defined her life. Rita's daughter, Princess Yasmin Aga Khan, refused to let her mother's suffering be misunderstood. She spoke openly about Alzheimer's, challenging the stigma and misinformation surrounding the disease. Yasmin clarified what Hollywood had ignored. Rita's struggles were not moral failures or personal weaknesses. They were medical, human, uncontrollable. Through interviews and advocacy, she reframed her mother's story. Rita was not a fallen star. She was a woman battling an illness without the knowledge or support available today. This public honesty helped bring attention to Alzheimer's at a time when few celebrities acknowledged it. In her silence, Rita inspired a conversation that would help millions. Rita Hayworth passed away in 1987, leaving behind a legacy the world was only beginning to understand. Tributes poured in, but many felt incomplete, focused on beauty rather than endurance. Only after her death did people begin reassessing what she represented. Her life forced Hollywood to confront its past. Control disguised as opportunity, exploitation masked as glamour. She became a symbol not just of classic cinema, but of what fame demands and rarely returns. Rita had given the world fantasy. In return, the world took her youth, her privacy, and eventually, her voice. What remained was a question Hollywood still struggles to answer. Rita Hayworth's story isn't just about one woman. It's about an industry and an audience. About how easily admiration becomes entitlement. We celebrate icons while ignoring their humanity. We consume their images, but forget the cost of creating them. Rita's life reminds us that behind every legend is a person absorbing pressure we'll never see. Her beauty made her famous. Her suffering made her human. And perhaps the real legacy of Rita Hayworth is this: fame does not excuse cruelty. Art does not justify control. And admiration should never come at the expense of compassion. because remembering someone truthfully may be the greatest respect we can offer.